So the first recording for this chapter, we covered the cerebrum, all the conscious thought, higher level thinking, memory, personality, those sorts of things. In this video, I'd like to jump into some of these so-called lower brain regions. So none of these are going to be involved in conscious thought, but they all have very important roles. A lot of times you'll hear people talk about maybe like a lizard brain, where really what makes mammals and particularly humans different is this large cerebrum and the decision-making processes that go on there, but all the life support systems are in this lower portion of the brain. So a lizard would have all these same regions, just not as developed of a cerebrum. Let's start over here with the cerebellum. So this is covered in section 14.5. And basically what I want you to know about the cerebellum is that it's adjusting kind of these ongoing movements. So if you're walking, right, we've talked about some other brain regions, that primary motor cortex may be making the conscious decision to walk, and maybe some of the basal nuclei, how they might be involved in the trunk and the upper portions of the limbs. What we're looking at here with the cerebellum, it also has a role to play in something like walking. So it's getting feedback about how things are going, right? And it's adjusting based on that, right? So it's adjusting ongoing movements by comparing arriving sensations with previously experienced sensations, right? So it's trying to decide, hey, is this like walking thing? Is this going well, right? Or do we need to make adjustments? So the cerebellum, you'll notice the similarity between the words cerebellum and cerebrum. I always think of it as kind of like a little nickname. It's the little brain, kind of like maybe in Spanish you would have someone named Sarah. The nickname might be Sarita, like a little addition there. So cerebellum is the little brain here. It does have an outer cortex that's made up of gray matter, and this gray matter is getting a ton of information. In fact, there's a layer in this cortex called the Purkinje cell layer, and these we are getting in this layer input from up to 200,000 different synapses, right? That's how many neurons are coming in here and synapsing. So lots and lots of information to deal with here. Again, adjusting postural muscles of the body. Cerebellum is going to be really important in helping us maintain balance or equilibrium. And then also programming and fine-tuning movements controlled at the conscious and subconscious levels. We were talking about that a little bit. Some of the instructions may be coming from the cerebrum and really the cerebellum, making adjustments or fine-tuning. Okay, so that's the cerebellum. Let's jump over here to the diencephalon. It kind of looks like a little alien. The diencephalon includes the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. I'm seeing that's not on this list here. The epithalamus would be, right, like hypo meaning low, this kind of lower area. Epi would be up here. The epithalamus contains the pineal gland, right? The pineal gland produces melatonin. That'll be important in some of your sleep-wake cycles. The thalamus is what I've referred to several times now as this filter where all the sensory information that's coming up the spinal cord and through the brainstem hits the thalamus, and we're going to filter out what's necessary and decide where, right, which of those white matter tracks we should send this information on in order to get it to the cortex, to where we have conscious awareness of that sensory information, right? So they're saying relaying and processing centers for sensory information. The hypothalamus has a lot of roles. I'm going to switch to another picture here. Now, this is kind of a confusing picture. This area is the thalamus, right? So notice where we are. Here's the thalamus and the hypothalamus. So thalamus, and then a little bit kind of below that, maybe this blue and purple here, is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus has so many roles. In fact, if you take AMP2, we're going to see it as kind of the running the endocrine system. And so it's this unique link between the nervous system and the endocrine system. So the hypothalamus, it secretes hormones like antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. It secretes a variety of regulatory hormones that direct the rest of the endocrine system via the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus is where your body temperature is regulated, right? So it's kind of the thermostat for your body. It does regulate circadian rhythms. It controls the pineal gland's outputs. It is where you house your feeding center, your satiety center, right? So telling you when you're hungry or full. Thirst centers, right? Telling you, hey, go grab that glass of water, refill your water bottle. It coordinates a lot of different autonomic functions, right? Heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, digestion, etc. Right? So it is definitely a huge player in autonomic control, right? And the endocrine system. Okay. The thalamus and the hypothalamus also play a role in what's called the limbic system. So that's what this picture is actually trying to show you. Kind of interesting, this limbic system is kind of hard to define anatomically, right? When you're dissecting a brain, you would not see any of this. That's actually why there's so many different colors on here trying to show kind of what's going on. So the limbic system is our reward system, right? So a lot of people say that, there's like some emotion and some memory here, but it's really that reward system. Did going for that run feel good? Did, what kind of reward, dopamine release, right, did you get from having that cookie, right? Those sorts of things. Anyway, so the limbic system, it includes the thalamus, the thalamus and hypothalamus, and then it also does, notice we're reaching into the cerebrum here as well. You don't need to know all these pieces parts, but you should realize that the limbic system is kind of that reward center of the brain. The other important one in pink they're showing you here, the hippocampus. That's an important part of the brain as far as memory goes. And there are some interesting connections actually with limbic system, that emotion and reward and memory, right? The more emotional an event is, the more likely you are to remember it. And then also here in purple, this is a fun one, the amygdala. This is where fear comes from. So some of us kind of need to tame our amygdala, right? Keep moving forward, and others maybe need the amygdala to speak a little louder and give us some good common sense. Okay, so that's what was going on there in the dicephalon. Epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Okay, as we keep moving down, we enter this region collectively called the brainstem. The brainstem includes the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So here in the midbrain, right, they're pointing out that we process visual and auditory data here. In fact, in lab, when you're doing your midbrain dissection, you'll see these two big bumps here on the midbrain. This is the superior colliculus and the inferior colliculus. Superior is where we process visual data. Inferior is where we process auditory. Excuse me. So these areas actually control the reflexes to these stimuli, right? If there's a loud sound, your head turns reflexively. The midbrain also contains nuclei, right? So clusters of gray matter called the substantia nigra. This releases dopamine that actually inhibits the basal nuclei in the cerebrum. And where this becomes important is it's kind of what levels out some of those movements that the basal nuclei are in charge of. And it's actually failure of the substantia nigra, right, of these nuclei here in the midbrain that causes Parkinson's disease. We also here have the reticular activating system, which is kind of what keeps you alert, awake, attentive, right? Basically maintaining consciousness. There's way more going on in these regions. I'm just trying to help narrow it down for you. As you're reading through the chapter, you'll see some of the amazing things, but really kind of focus in on some of these key players that they're pointing out here. So the pons, right, again, we're moving down the brainstem. The pons is actually our link, right? See the pons here in blue is our link to the cerebellum, right? So it links the cerebellum to the rest of the brain. Other things that are important here in the pons, we modify some breathing activities that actually are decided by the medulla. We'll talk about that. And then we also have a lot of cranial nerves that actually come off of the pons as well. Cranial nerves 5, 6, 7, and 8 are going to come off the pons. We'll visit those soon. Here we have the medulla oblongata, right? This is the most inferior region of the brainstem. Below this, we're connecting into the spinal cord. So that's one of the things the medulla does, is connects us to the spinal cord. Really important autonomic controls here. So again, all unconscious, visceral sort of things. So the medulla oblongata, obviously the information coming up the spinal cord is going to travel through, and so they're saying it's relaying that sensory information. But we have a really lot of important autonomic centers here. We regulate things like breathing, blood pressure, posture, a variety of different reflexes. We house what are called respiratory rhythmic centers. This sets up the basic pace of all of our respiratory movements. We have cardiovascular centers located here in the medulla where, so cardiovascular, cardiac refers to the heart. We adjust heart rate, the strength of contraction. Vascular, right, referring to blood vessels. We do vasodilation, vasoconstriction to change blood flow throughout the body. So the medulla has some really important roles here. You'll also see here in yellow a bunch of cranial nerves coming off, and so those are going to be some for cranial nerves 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.